Welcome to Summer in October. I'm Alex, and today we're going to talk about George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead series, specifically the movies The Original Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. So movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s respectively. I'm going to actually give you my ranking. I'm going to rank these three, and I'll give you my reasons why. But first, I just want to talk about the fact that these are amazing movies. Despite, the budget changes, I'm not going to rank them based on, obviously, there's budget, there's technological advances in filmmaking that lead to the differences in the movies. I mean, the first one is black and white. I'm not going to rank it based on that because we can pay respect to that evolution. More than that, he gets the evolution of the storytelling and just advancing on his own concepts and creation so great. So spoilers ahead. Night of the Living Dead is basically the concept of the zombie apocalypse. Zombies are starting. Nobody really understands what it is. They don't know how to kill them. They don't know how to get away from them. But we're actually hearing on the radio or the TV broadcast people learning as they go. First, they think it's just people who are gone mad and starting cannibalism. They do not understand that these are the undead. So we get to explore that side of it. Then Dawn of the Dead is when we're in a full-fledged breakout. People know that they have to fight for their lives. They know that they have to try to survive. They have to win. And we see these bigger hordes of zombies. We see more isolation. We see more conflict. And then Day of the Dead is actually, we've kind of lost hope. We may be the only people left alive. What do we do? And so I'm going to talk about all those concepts when I go over each movie in my ranking. I want you to know this was a really close and difficult one to rank. I loved all these movies, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 3, which some people may be mad about, but it's Day of the Dead. Listen, I love Day of the Dead. I love Bub, okay? The concept of a zombie still collecting its thoughts really hits on the morality that goes through this series. Because once they discover that you need to burn the bodies of the zombies and you can't just give it back to the loved ones, or if somebody dies, you can't just bury them, you have to cut off their head and burn them, I believe. You can see where people struggle with that. And I like that we nod to that because that is so real. Telling someone who just lost somebody that, okay, now you need to mutilate their body, not an easy concept or a thing to swallow. So they really touch on morality. And then when we see Bub, who can actually access some of their own memories, their own muscle memory, their own brain memory, it becomes even more complicated. Because yes, it's the undead, it's a zombie, but there's still an essence of who they are soul-wise, if you want to look at it like that. So it makes me love him, and I'm like, I love a zombie. But this whole story takes place in a bunker. So these people do not know if they are the only ones alive or if there's other people out there. We have 3 groups, definitely 3 different ways you can take on the apocalypse. We have the military boys who are, we can fight, we need to end this. They want to rule and they want to follow an order and they want to fight. And then you have the scientists who are trying to find a cure or at least some way to resolve the problem because in their minds, which is probably the truth, there's too many zombies out there to just fight through them. It's not going to be enough people left alive to fight their way out. And then we have a couple characters who are kind of like, I just want to be on a beach. I'm just going to exist here. I'm going to live in my own little utopia, and I'm going to dream of being on the beach. And I think that's 3 very distinct ways you can approach this. Scientifically, going on offense. And then you have the people who are like, I'm just going to enjoy what time I have and dream of a better life, which I would like to say is me, but I'd probably be on the scientist side. So we get all these big conflicts between these people. And, the military guys make it very clear that they're not willing to risk their men on this pursuit unless they have proof of something, which is completely valuable. And so we get the scientist, the mad one, that is working with the Frankenstein zombie, we'll say. It's Bub. And he's actually trying to domesticate them, which I don't really think is realistic to get out of the situation. But what comes to find out is that this man has been feeding Bub to reward him like a dog with a treat, the bodies of the lost military men, the ones that have lost their lives in probably pursuit of getting these zombies, because they have to capture them so they can run tests. And so you get to see that there is a science pathway for this, but there's also a mad science pathway. And the morality of that, on his quest to figure out a problem, even though I think he just really wants to domesticate Bub, I don't actually think he thinks it's scalable. He's willing to disregard human life of the military. So there's a lot of tension there. And there's also one guy in this who is another factor that we need to throw in here, is the person in panic. If you ever done emergency training, you know that someone who panics is a risk to everybody. So it was very clear from the start he was going to be a risk, and that he was. And obviously this movie had much better like effects and ripping people apart, which I loved. And it was just such a ending, you know? Like the revenge that Bub got was kind of perfect. The hordes of zombies in the cave were really scary. There was a lot of tension. It wasn't enough for me because everybody was down in a bunker, and the way it actually ended on the beach, it didn't fulfill me or leave me with terror like the other ones. But I did really like it, and I like the zombie design. We saw people who you would assume died in certain like outfits. Like there's a fisherman, there's a clown, there's a chef, and it made me think like, what would I want to turn to a zombie and still be wearing? So it was a good movie. I really liked it. It just didn't have the same effect in the viewing experience. And now these next two are going to be kind of hard to rank. I go back and forth. But I'm going to put it this way. Okay? But I'm still going back and forth, and you'll see why. Number 2 is Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, it is a masterpiece in commentary, basically. I really, really like it. We basically have 4 characters that end up stuck with each other. The movie starts, and you can actually see like the community conflict, people who are being killed by the military on this quest to kill the zombies, which, you know, leans back into what we saw in the ending of Night of the Living Dead. But you get some social commentary there, you get some different personalities. But what happens is these 4 people, they end up at a mall. So they find this mall, they're in a helicopter, and a lot of people are like, yeah, I'll just fly away. But I like that they address that. You have to stop for fuel, you need to eat, you need to drink, people need to sleep. You can't just fly a helicopter as far as you want because you think it's the right answer. You can't just go wherever you think because you don't know where the zombies are, and you don't know where the resources are. So it made it really realistic. So they set up shop in the mall, and we get these really different personalities here. And one thing I did like about Day of the Dead was they had a more strong female lead. The female lead in this one got a little bit stronger because we know the females in the first movie were just troublemakers, panickers, and problem causers, and damsels in distresses. I did not align with that. That is not who I would be in the zombie apocalypse. So they're living in this mall, and there is a lot of zombies, and they have to figure out like how they're going to get supplies, how they're going to hide in the stairwell, what they're going to do. And they almost make a game out of it. You can see the guys getting really hyped up and laughing and cheering and making a game out of it. And Roger shows the impacts of this. You know, like when you even talk about workplace accidents, it always comes from complacency. I mean, not always, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of it comes from complacency. So he was getting so hyped, and he's trained, and he's ready, and he's making a game out of this that he gets really complacent. He makes reckless decisions. And in a zombie apocalypse, you can't make those because you put other people at risk, but you also put yourself at risk. And that's what happens to him. He gets bit, and he needs to be killed. And that is a really hard thing to come to terms with in this movie. They have to take it from him when he comes back to life. It's very emotional, but it does show how that can come back to bite you. With his loss, they did have a gain that they locked down the mall. They got all the zombies out, they had the mall to themselves. There's one couple, and I believe it's Steven and Francine, and then there's Peter. So the couple, we find out the woman is actually pregnant. And I do like that she first was feeling very damsel in distressy, and then she was like, no, I'm useful, let me be useful. This couple and this man are basically making house. They have this little area in the stairway. They have unlimited reach in the mall, which is kind of a dream, by the way. And they go and just get everything they need. But you can see the monotony and just like how tiring and bored and helpless and hopeless they still all feel. They have everything they need at their fingertips, and they have safety, and it's not enough. That's a very big comment on consumerism and capitalism, which I love all the commentaries in these movies. Although that part drags, I do understand the importance of showing it. And that was the reason why this movie for me kind of fits more into second place. But at the same time, this is the one of this trilogy that I think about the most. This is the one that I keep thinking back to and play things over in my head. But it's just this dragging part for me, viewing experience wise. And there's a feeling the first one gives me that we'll talk about. Obviously, the plot has to change. You know, they're safe, they have everything, they're bored, something has to happen. What happens is basically the unavoidable. Someone spots a helicopter, they start to understand there's somebody there, they radio in, they respond, and it's like this motorcycle gang, And this is something else we see is the community on community conflict, for resources. But for these people, they seem like they're just kind of bad for no reason. Obviously, they need resources, but they have fun with the zombies. They're on motorcycles. They're being rowdy. Steven does fire the first shot at them, which then causes more conflict in the mall. But this is when we get zombie carnage, and I loved it. And that's what I wanted more of this movie, I think, is zombie carnage. That slow period is what took it away. I just need to talk about the scene. In the middle of everybody freaking out, there's guns going off because there's people shooting at each other. There's zombies attacking them everywhere. We're thinking about the pregnant woman upstairs. We need to get back to her somehow. And a man from the motorcycle gang, as zombies are chasing him, he says, you know what? I should probably check my blood pressure, and puts his arm in the blood pressure cuff. I thought this was hilarious. You can tell it was just like an addition so they could do a cool scene or shot with it, but it was just so funny. I really think about this ending a lot too. Steven and Peter get separated and they're trying to find their way back to each other, and Steven almost gets out of it, but then he gets shot. And then Peter is finally up where he needs to be, and he's waiting for Steven. But the zombies who have now attacked and eaten all the motorcycle gang, and the gang is out of there, they actually get Steven in the elevator. And the shot of Steven in the elevator when he's a zombie, amazing. So Peter goes back up. They're like, we need to get out of here. The zombies are going to find us, because they made a note at the beginning. The woman asked, why are the zombies going to the mall? And Peter said, which is what Bub kind of expands on, they're going back to what they're used to. They're going back to what they know, which I love these little links and the expansion of that. But that's why Steven knew to go up in the stairwell, because they have until now gotten the zombies, except for one that trickled his way up there because they, made some noise. The zombies were leaving that area alone, and when they're locked out, obviously they couldn't get to it. But Steven, now having that brain memory, muscle memory, whatever you want to call it, he goes up there. And Peter says, it's Steven, he's coming back. So he has to kill Steven. Heartbreaking, but, it has to be done. Then they're talking about escaping. This is crazy. I love this whole scene. Steven showed her how to fly a helicopter, so she knew she could get out of there. And she told Peter, what's our plan? And he said, I don't want to leave. He was giving up. He was not going to keep fighting. He was tired. He was hopeless. So she gets up in the helicopter. There's zombies everywhere. He's letting zombies in, and he hides in the corner of a room with a gun to his head, and you think that's what's going to happen to him. But in that last moment, he wants to fight. He fights his way up, he jumps onto the helicopter, and he climbs up. And I love that commentary as well, because in the zombie apocalypse, there are going to be people who feel too hopeless, too scared. They don't want to keep fighting. And he had that struggle, but I love that he chose to live, especially after what happens to the first man in the original movie. I'm glad that he fought and he ended up being okay. I needed that ending. And now that brings us to my number one, which is Night of the Living Dead. The reason this is my number one, okay, obviously objectively it's not as good of a movie. It's in black and white. There's not as much carnage. The scenes have to be you swing a crowbar and then you see the person and then the person pulls back and then there's a wound. I kind of liked it. I found that very charming. I found it gave it just so much essence to the movie. I don't know what it is. I really thought that older movies were going to turn me off a little, but I'm really thinking that I like this. I like when you can tell the work that went into it. They're coming for you, Barbara. Barbara and her brother are visiting a grave in a cemetery, and a zombie approaches them. She has to run away from her brother. I believe his name is Jason. I might be getting that wrong. And she runs away and finds herself in a house, boards herself up in a house. She is just a damsel in distress. There's certain times she was so frozen, I thought she may be bitten, because they were describing the zombies in a trance-like state. And so this all takes place in this house. And a man comes in, Ben. I think he was just looking for supplies, looking for somewhere to board up, and she happened to be in there. And he was trying to explain to her what was happening, and she didn't really understand. She was really, really helpless and really annoying in this movie. But once everything is boarded up and they're a little bit safe, there's people downstairs in the cellar or the basement. They had themselves boarded in. They were saying this is the safest place for them to be, which is ironic because it actually was the safest place in the stairwell in the mall, but it still technically wasn't safe because, as we know, if the zombies can get to you and you are backed into a corner, that is not good. And we get one little Easter egg that their daughter is sick. And we kind of got a feeling what's going to happen, but for them, they don't even know that this is something that can be transferred like that. And so all the zombies are outside. They have to fight them with fire. They decide that they're going to try to get the truck gas and get out of there. And so they know they can use fire to get out of them, so they all make a plan. But there's one man who is the father and just the older gentleman kind of taking authority, who is being a little bit hard to work with. He's not a team player. He wants to lead, but he's not necessarily open to ideas. And he causes a lot of mischief. We'll say that. He wants everyone to go to the basement. They refuse. And there's a young couple, and the guy agrees to go with Ben. We're going to get in the truck. Everyone else stay safe here. We have a gun. We have fire. We can get gas, and we can all leave. We can get out of this. And I like to see that you're already seeing that just staying in one place boarded up is not good enough. Once the zombies know where you are, it started with 3, and then there was a horde outside. And you need supplies, you need to live, people need medical attention, you want to get out of there. Even if it's not a necessity, it's often a want, which we also get introduced to in Dawn of the Dead. You could have everything, you could have a mall of everything you need, it's still not enough. When they're going to do this, the girlfriend of the young man, she decides, I don't want him to go alone, I want to go with him. And now we're introducing the ideas of recklessness, because we have her who just thinks she needs to be with her boyfriend. She ends up honestly getting them killed because her coat gets stuck, they can't get out of the truck, and the zombies are coming up. The truck is going to blow up, and the zombies eat them, which, man, this movie was eerie. And that's why I like this movie. This movie gave me terror. It made me scared. The other ones were a lot of conflict and action, and yes, a little bit scary, but this one gave me terror because they also had no idea what they were faced with, and they were acting as humans do. So she's one issue. And then when Ben sees what's going on, he's like, I need to get back. I need to get back in the house. The older man locks him out. Ben breaks in and then beats his ass. And honestly, he deserved it. He should not have left him out there to die. We also saw this in Dawn of the Dead, people taking reckless shots. They could have shot somebody. When they're collecting the zombies, the guy panics in Day of the Dead and kills somebody else. Your choices have to be so intentional. And it really, really puts the pressure on humans to be good humans. And we know not everybody is, because when people are acting out of emotion, when people are acting out of fear, out of panic, they make bad decisions. And that would obviously cost us in a zombie apocalypse. So he gets in, he beats that guy up, and now we're all boarded up in this house again. But the zombies are trying to get in, and get in they do. But the fun little twist, which I kind of expected, but now I understand how many homages are made to this moment, is the little girl turns into a zombie. And then it is just a freaky montage of the zombies coming in, the girl coming up out of the basement, the people dying. But something that's interesting is the brother of Barbara is in the horde of zombies. And we see another element of human emotion. She runs to him and hugs him like, oh, please help me, please help me. Obviously, she gets bitten and eaten. Now, while all this is going on, we are listening to broadcasts of them talking to the military, talking to the government, like, what are we going to do? And I love the news reporter who was like, this ought to take about 24 hours, you think? That is so American and Canadian, really. We think people can just solve problems in an instant without actually thinking about the logistics. So that was just really entertaining. But then we start to see the military being like, we can handle this. We're just going to shoot everything we need to. We're going to burn the bodies. We don't care about your feelings. And obviously, I get what needs to be done, but obviously people have a problem with that, which stretches into Dawn of the Dead. We see that conflict really play out there. Night of the Living Dead is really like the realization. Dawn of the Dead is the denial of everything. And then Day of the Dead is kind of like the acceptance, and then what you do with that. So in Night of the Living Dead then, Ben survives the night. He boards himself up, he is safe. We see the military going through the field, shooting everything down that they need to. And Ben comes out. And he hears dogs barking, he hears commotion and guns, he knows there's someone there. He is still afraid. So he gets up in the window in the house, and they see the house, they're going to go search it. Now there's a man up there with a gun. I don't know if it's because they were just careless. I don't know if it was a racism commentary, because we do see that in the next movie. I don't know if it was just, we're gunning down everything, and whatever survives, survives. It ends with him getting shot and killed. He survived his night in the zombie apocalypse just to get shot and killed by the people who should have been saving him. I literally wanted to pick up my laptop and just throw it. This movie and Dawn of the Dead, it really goes back and forth for me. Like, even right now saying it, I'm not sure. But there's something about Night of the Living Dead and the terror and the panic and the worry and the realization of this is all the different conflicts we're going to have to deal with. It's not just there's zombies. It's how you have to dispose of the zombies so they don't come back, figuring out how it transfers, figuring out how to kill them, dealing with your human emotions while not putting other people and yourself at risk, how to handle when people are sick, how to handle when people are bitten. There's just so much commentary and buildup and human life that went into this movie that created terror and dread and eeriness. And I really like that dark side of a movie. I love Dawn of the Dead. I love Day of the Dead. But Night of the Living Dead is my favorite just for that darkness that exists in it. So let me know what your ranking is. Again, it's open to you. Obviously, this is subjective. This is my opinion and my feelings. But I would love to hear what you think. And let me know if I should do the remakes and everything else.